This story is titled, My Stepson, Who I Raised as My Own, Blocked Me from His Wedding Because His Fiance's Family. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey Reddit, this is a bit of a messy one, so bear with me. Alright, here goes. I'm 52 female, and this story's about me and Alex, 25 male, my stepson, though I don't even like calling him that. He's just my son, plain and simple. I've been in his life since he was a baby, and I raised him after his dad, Mark, passed away. But as much as I love him, I'm not sure I even recognize him anymore. Let me take you back. Mark and I met when Alex was only 6 months old. His mom had passed away during childbirth, and Mark was doing his best to juggle work and being a single dad. When we met, it wasn't one of those whirlwind romances, more like a slow, steady burn. We clicked because we were both hardworking, no-nonsense people. Mark was sweet but practical, and I admired how he doted on Alex, even when he was clearly exhausted. By the time we got married a year later, Alex was toddling around and calling me mama. Back then, life felt pretty perfect. Mark had a good job, and I started working part-time at a local diner. We bought a modest little house in a quiet neighborhood. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, a big backyard where Alex could run around. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Things changed when Alex was 5. Mark passed away suddenly. An aneurysm. One day he was there, laughing at dinner, tucking Alex into bed, and the next, he was gone. I woke up that morning and noticed he hadn't moved. I thought he was just sleeping in for once, but when I nudged him, his body was cold. I can't describe the panic that took over. I remember screaming his name, dialing 911 with shaking hands, and trying to keep Alex away from the bedroom. When the paramedics told me he was gone, I was devastated. But I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. Alex was clinging to my leg, asking where Daddy was, and I had to be strong for him. After Mark's death, it was just me and Alex against the world. Money was tight, and I had to pick up extra shifts at the diner to make ends meet. I sold Mark's car and some of his tools to cover the funeral costs. I cried myself to sleep most nights, but I always made sure Alex never saw. During the day, I kept it together, packing his lunches, reading him bedtime stories, making sure he never felt like he was missing out, even when I was barely holding on. I became a master of DIY. Our house needed a lot of work over the years. I couldn't afford a handyman, so I learned how to fix things myself. I bought a secondhand toolbox, watched tutorials, and just figured it out. Alex would sometimes sit beside me while I worked, handing me tools and asking endless questions. I remember thinking, this is enough. As long as we have each other, this is enough. I did my best to give Alex a good childhood. I made sure he got to play soccer, even though it meant squeezing pennies to pay for the uniform. I volunteered at his school so I could be part of his world. I taught him how to ride a bike, how to cook spaghetti, and even how to fix a flat tire. But things weren't always smooth. As Alex got older, he started pushing back. He was embarrassed by our hand-me-down car and our outdated house. Once, in middle school, he begged me not to come to career day because he didn't want his friends to know his mom worked at a diner. That stung, but I ignored it, figuring it was just the teenagers phase. High school was harder. Alex started hanging out with kids who had more than we did. Fancy clothes, new gadgets, vacations to Disney World. He'd come home and complain about how we didn't have a big screen TV, or how I couldn't afford the latest gaming console. I tried explaining that I was doing the best I could, but he'd just roll his eyes and say, "Whatever, Mom." Still, there were good moments too. He got really into music during his teenage years, and I saved up to buy him a secondhand guitar. He played it non-stop, and for a while it felt like we were close again. He even wrote me a song once for Mother's Day. When Alex went off to college, I was both proud and heartbroken. Proud because he'd worked hard and earned a scholarship, and heartbroken because I knew our little house would feel empty without him. I helped him pack his things and set up his dorm, trying not to cry as I said goodbye. At first, he called me all the time, asking how to cook certain meals, telling me about his classes, even asking for advice about girls. But as the months went on, the calls became less frequent. I figured he was just busy. Then, during his sophomore year, he started dating that girl named Lily. I didn't meet her right away, but when I did, she seemed nice enough. But as the years went on, things started to shift. Alex visited less often, and when he did, he always seemed in a hurry to leave. He'd make comments about how the house was falling apart, or how I should modernize the kitchen. He said it with a laugh, like it was a joke, but I knew he meant it. It hurt, but I didn't let it show. I thought I'd done everything right. raising him with love, giving him everything I could, but somehow it felt like I was losing him. And the worst part was, I didn't know how to stop it. Alex was growing into someone I didn't recognize, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. Let me tell you about the first time I met Lily was during Thanksgiving break. Alex brought her home for dinner, and I was nervous. I wanted to make a good impression, even though I wasn't exactly sure what good meant. I spent all day cooking, trying to whip up something that felt a little fancier than our usual meals. By the time they arrived, I was sweating and stressed, but determined to play the cool, welcoming mom. Lily was different from what I expected. She was petite, polished, and impeccably dressed, like she'd stepped out of a catalog. She greeted me with a polite smile and a soft handshake, calling me Ms. Last Name, even though I told her she could just call me by my first name. She was nice enough, but there was a distance to her that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Dinner was awkward. Lily didn't eat much, just picked at her plate while Alex practically inhaled the food. I tried to make conversation, asking her about school and her family, but her answers were short and clipped. Oh, my parents work in real estate. Yeah, I like college. It's been fun. I chalked it up to nerves. After all, meeting the boyfriend's mom can't be easy. But Alex? He seemed completely at ease. He couldn't stop smiling at her, and he kept brushing off her discomfort like it wasn't a big deal. When she quietly whispered something about the house being charming, Alex laughed and said, "Yeah, Mom's house is kind of old school, isn't it?" Smiled and laughed along, not wanting to make a scene. After they left, I felt a bit off. It wasn't that Lily was rude. She wasn't. But she didn't seem interested in me or my world. I told myself I was being paranoid, that she'd warm up eventually. But as their relationship grew, that disconnect only deepened. The next time Lily came over, it was for Christmas. I was looking forward to it, hoping we'd have a chance to bond. I even bought her a thoughtful little gift, a cozy scarf I'd seen her admiring during Thanksgiving. When she opened it, she smiled politely and said, "Thank you, this is nice." But there was no real warmth in her voice. Alex, on the other hand, lit up when he opened his gift from her, a sleek, expensive-looking watch. I didn't even know college students could afford watches like that. Throughout the visit, Lily seemed restless. She spent most of her time on her phone, scrolling through Instagram or texting. I caught her taking a few photos of Alex's room, which confused me until Alex explained later that she was showing her friends how he grew up. That made me feel small, like our home was some kind of curiosity to her. Then there were the comments. They were subtle, but they added up. "Your furniture has so much character. I've never seen a TV like that before. I can't believe you still have landlines." She wasn't saying anything outright mean, but the tone made it clear she found everything here quaint, almost laughable. Alex either didn't notice or didn't care. He'd just laugh along and say, "Yeah, my mom's pretty old school." Over time, Alex started changing too. He began making similar comments about how the house was outdated, how I should think about remodeling, how I could spruce things up a little. It felt like Lily's world was bleeding into his, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. I remember one conversation vividly. Alex called me one night and asked if I'd ever considered upgrading the house. I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he wasn't. "Mom, you could get a loan or something. Lily's parents remodeled their kitchen last year, and it made such a difference. You'd love it." I was stunned. "Alex, do you know how much that would cost? Can't just drop tens of thousands of dollars on renovations." "Well, you could sell the house," he said casually, as if it were the simplest solution in the world. "You'd make a good profit and could move somewhere nicer." I told him firmly that this was my home, the home where I raised him, the home where his father and I built our life together. This house was everything to me. I thought he'd understand, but he just sighed and said, "All right, but don't be surprised if people think it's outdated." The turning point came about a year into their relationship. Alex invited me to dinner at Lily's parents' house. I was thinking maybe this was my chance to finally get to know her better. Their house was massive, the kind you see in magazines. High ceilings, marble floors, a pool in the backyard. I felt like I'd walked into a different world. Dinner was formal, too formal. There were multiple courses, a waiter, yes, a waiter in their house, and wine pairings I couldn't pronounce. Lily's parents were polite but also distant, and I could tell they were sizing me up. At one point, her mom asked me what I did for a living, and when I said I taught at a community college, she nodded and said, "That's nice." The pause said everything. I tried to engage, to find common ground, but it was like talking to statues. They seemed more interested in discussing their latest vacation to Europe or the new investment property they'd bought. Meanwhile, I was just trying not to spill soup on the white tablecloth. Alex, to my surprise, fit right in. He laughed at their jokes, joined in on their conversations about stocks and market trends, although his genuine self wasn't like that, and barely acknowledged me the whole night. I felt invisible, like I was just there to fill a seat. After dinner, as we were leaving, Lily's dad pulled Alex aside and handed him an envelope. I didn't think much of it until later, when I overheard Alex telling Lily it was a check to help him get on his feet. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, scrimping and saving to help him through college. And these people who didn't even know him, were just handing him money like it was nothing. That night, as I drove home, I couldn't stop replaying the evening in my head. It was clear that Lily came from a completely different world, one I'd never be part of. And Alex? He seemed to be slipping further into that world with every passing day. I felt like I was losing him, like the bond we'd built over the years was unraveling, and I didn't know how to stop it. By the time I got home, I was exhausted, physically, emotionally, everything. I sat in the living room, looking around at the house that I'd worked so hard to keep, and for the first time, it didn't feel like home. It felt like a relic of a life Alex was leaving behind, and I had no idea where that left me. Then, out of nowhere, Alex told me he and Lily were engaged. I wanted to be happy. I really did. He called one evening, his voice bursting with excitement, and said, "Mom, she said yes." I could hear Lily in the background, laughing and talking to someone else. My first reaction was to smile, but then the reality hit me. This was serious. My boy was getting married, officially becoming part of a world that felt more and more distant from mine. I congratulated him, of course. I told him how proud I was, how much I looked forward to being there for him and Lily. He seemed genuinely happy, and for a moment, I let myself believe everything would work out. I'd figure out how to navigate this new dynamic, no matter how out of place I felt. That's what moms do, right? The engagement party was set for a month later. Alex told me it would be just a small gathering at Lily's parents' country club. I didn't even know people still used country clubs. He assured me it was casual, nothing too fancy, but something about his tone made me skeptical. So I spent days stressing over what to wear. I finally settled on a simple dress I'd worn to a few faculty events. When I arrived at the club, I immediately knew I'd made a mistake. Casual? Not even close. The parking lot was filled with luxury cars, and every person walking in looked like they'd stepped off a fashion runway. Inside, the place was stunning. I felt like I'd walked into a movie set. Alex greeted me at the door with a quick hug, but he seemed distracted. He was wearing a tailored suit, something I'd never seen him in before. He looked so polished, so not like the Alex I knew. "Mom, you made it," he said, grinning. "Lily's parents are going to love meeting you." As I stepped further into the room, I realized I was completely out of my depth. Groups of people stood around in clusters, discussing things like stock portfolios, art galleries, and vacation homes. I stood awkwardly by the entrance for what felt like forever, before Alex finally introduced me to Lily's parents. "Mom, this is Mr. and Mrs. Harper," Alex said, gesturing to a tall man in a crisp suit, and a woman wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than my car. Mrs. Harper smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's so nice to finally meet you." Mr. Harper shook my hand firmly and said, "Alex has told us so much about you." I wondered if any of it was true. I tried to make conversation, but it quickly became clear we had nothing in common. When Mrs. Harper asked if I'd traveled much, I mentioned a road trip Alex and I had taken to the Grand Canyon when he was a kid. She smiled politely and said, "Oh, how quaint." Quaint? I think she could have chosen a better word. I excused myself soon after, retreating to a corner where I could just observe. It didn't take long for the cracks to show. Lily was making her rounds, introducing Alex to her parents' friends like he was a prize trophy. He smiled and nodded, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. At one point, she laughed and said, "Isn't Alex just the perfect fit for our family?" The way she said it made me disgusted, like he was being molded into something he wasn't. Then there were the whispers. I caught snippets of conversations as I moved through the crowd. "Oh, she's his mother?" someone said, their tone dripping with judgment. "I thought she'd be more put together." Another person laughed quietly. I tried to ignore it, but it was impossible not to feel the weight of their words. Meanwhile, Alex and Lily were at the head table, laughing and toasting with her parents. I couldn't help but notice how at home he seemed in their world, while I felt like an outsider looking in. It hurt, more than I wanted to admit. After dinner, Alex pulled me aside. "Mom, are you having fun?" he asked, his eyes darting around the room. I hesitated, then said, "It's different." He laughed nervously and said, "Yeah, I know it's not your usual scene, but it means a lot that you're here." Before I could say anything else, he leaned in and whispered, "Hey, just a heads up. Lily's family is big on appearances. Maybe try to blend in a little more?" I was confused. Blend in? Was he embarrassed by me? He must have noticed my expression because he quickly added, "Not in a bad way. Just, keep it low-key." I left the party early. As I drove home, tears blurred my vision. I kept replaying his words in my head over and over. Maybe try to blend in. I'd raised him, given him everything I had, and now I was supposed to pretend I didn't exist in his world? The engagement party was a wake-up call. Alex was moving further into Lily's world, and I was being left behind. For the first time, I started to wonder if there was even a place for me in his future, or if he'd already decided I didn't fit. Then I had another thing to deal with, the wedding. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was feeling cautiously optimistic. Despite everything, the engagement party, the tension with Lily's family, and Alex's increasingly distant behavior, I'd convinced myself I could still be a part of this day. After all, weddings are about family, right? That's what I kept telling myself, even as little signs started piling up that maybe I wasn't welcome. It started with the wedding details, or more accurately, the lack of them. I didn't know much about the plans because no one had told me anything. When I asked Alex about my role in the ceremony, he'd shrug and say, "Oh, don't worry about it, Mom. Just show up and enjoy." I thought they were just keeping things simple, but as time went on, it became clear I wasn't part of the inner circle. I wasn't asked to help with the planning, wasn't invited to dress fittings, and didn't even know what time I was supposed to arrive at the venue until I finally asked outright. The venue itself was another sore spot. Alex had casually mentioned it in passing. What he didn't know was that I had helped him secure it. A friend of mine from college managed the venue, and when Alex told me they couldn't book it because it was too exclusive, I'd quietly reached out to pull some strings. I thought I was doing something meaningful, something that would make him happy. Turns out, he never even connected the dots. When he talked about the venue, it was as if I had nothing to do with it. The real blow came one evening when Alex showed up at my house unannounced. He looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot as he stood in the doorway. "Can I come in?" he asked. Of course I let him in, but he was acting weird. We sat in the living room, and he launched into what felt like a rehearsed speech. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the wedding," he started. "There's been a situation." "What kind of situation?" I asked. He hesitated, then blurted it out. "Lily's parents think it's best if you don't come to the wedding." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. "What?" I asked, holding myself to be calm. "It's not personal," he said quickly. "They're just worried about the image. You know how they are. They're really particular about appearances, and they think it might be better if you sat this one out." "You're telling me I'm not welcome at my own son's wedding?" I asked. "Mom, it's not like that," he said, avoiding my gaze. "They're just really stressed about everything. It's nothing against you personally." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything I'd done for him, raising him, supporting him, sacrificing so much to make sure he had a good life, he was asking me to step aside for the sake of appearances. "And what about you, Alex?" I asked, tears welling up in my eyes. "Do you agree with them? Do you think I don't belong there?" He finally looked at me, and for a split second I thought I saw guilt in his eyes. But then he said, "Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's just one day. We can celebrate together afterward, just the two of us. Just one day." That's what he called it. As if this wasn't one of the most important days of his life. As if I could just brush it off like it didn't matter. After all this, I had a thought crossed my mind. One that stopped me cold. Did Lily even know about this? Or was this all Alex's doing? I decided to find out. The next day, I called Lily. When she picked up, she sounded cheerful, completely unaware of the storm brewing. "Hi, my name. How are you?" she chirped. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice was tight. "Listen, I need to ask you something. Alex told me your parents don't want me at the wedding. Is that true?" There was a long pause. "What?" She seemed confused. "Why would he say that? Of course you're invited. You're his mom." I felt a wave of relief, quickly followed by anger. Alex had lied to me. But why? Was he trying to protect me? Was he just trying to appease Lily's parents? Either way, it didn't make sense. Lily, on the other hand, was furious. She apologized profusely and promised to talk to Alex and her parents immediately. I hung up the phone feeling both vindicated and deeply unsettled. What else hadn't Alex told me? Later that evening, Alex called me in a panic. "Mom, why did you call Lily?" he demanded. "Because I needed to hear the truth," I shot back. "Why would you lie to me, Alex? What were you trying to accomplish?" He stammered. "I didn't want things to get messy," he finally said. "I thought it'd be easier if..." Easier for who? I interrupted. For you? For them? What about me, Alex? Did you even stop to think about how I'd feel? He didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he muttered something about how I was making a big deal out of nothing, and hung up. I sat there, stunned. How had it come to this? That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let anyone, Alex, Lily's parents, or anyone else, treat me like I didn't matter. I called my friend who managed the venue and told him to cancel the booking. When he asked why, I explained everything. He was shocked but understanding and promised to refund the deposit. When Alex and Lily found out the next day, all hell broke loose. Alex called me furious. "Mom, what did you do?" he yelled. "We're 2 weeks away from the wedding and now we don't have a venue." "I did what I had to do," I said calmly. "You don't get to exclude me from your life and expect me to keep bending over backward for you." He called me selfish, said I was ruining his wedding. But I didn't care. The fallout was immediate. Lily's parents were livid. Alex was scrambling to find a new venue, and I became public enemy number one. But you know what? I didn't feel bad. If they wanted to shut me out of their perfect little world, then they could deal with the consequences. So here where I am right now, what do you guys think the motives that Alex is hiding? Think maybe he is just embarrassed by me, but still there's something going on, and I don't know what is. If anything arises, I'll post an update here. Final update. Hey people, I spent the last nights reading your comments. I appreciate you guys for standing up to me. It gave me some relief. Some crazy things happened lately, so I figured I needed to post an update. So, a few days after the venue fiasco, my phone rang. It was Lily. I hesitated for a moment before answering, bracing myself for another round of accusations. Instead, her voice came through soft and hesitant. "Can we talk?" she asked. "In person?" I wasn't sure what to expect, but I agreed. We met at a coffee shop. When she walked in, she looked different. Less polished, more subdued. Her usual air of confidence was replaced by something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Lily started without any small talk. "I spoke to my parents," she said, her eyes fixed on her cup. "They were upset about the venue, obviously, but when I told them why it happened, they admitted they'd suggested to Alex that you take a step back from the wedding." I stayed quiet, letting her continue. "They said they thought it would streamline things, make it easier for everyone, but I swear, I never agreed to that. I told them I wanted you there." I could tell she was being sincere, but it didn't change how much it hurt. "So, what about Alex?" I asked. "Why did he lie to me?" She sighed, stirring her tea. "He said he thought it would avoid drama, that if you weren't there, my parents would be happier, and everything would go smoothly. He was trying to keep everyone happy." "Everyone but me," I said flatly. Lily winced, nodding. "I didn't know he'd told you it was my parents' idea. He lied to me too. He said you didn't want to come because you didn't approve of our relationship." I froze. That was new. "He told you what?" "That you didn't like me. That you thought I was too different, too stuck up." Hearing that broke something in me. I'd always known Alex could be self-centered sometimes, but this was a new low. He'd lied to me, lied to Lily, and manipulated both of us to avoid conflict. In trying to please everyone else, he'd made everything worse. Lily looked up at me. "I called you because I wanted to hear your side. I needed to know if it was true." I shook my head. "Lily, I've never had a problem with you. I've always thought you were a lovely girl. Sure, we're from different worlds, but that doesn't mean I don't want Alex to be happy. I didn't think I'd ever have to fight this hard to stay in his life." She nodded. "I believe you," she said softly. "And I'm sorry. For all of it." We sat there in silence for a while, letting everything sink in. Then, Lily said something I wasn't expecting. "I don't know if I can go through with the wedding." "What do you mean?" I said. She hesitated, searching for the right words. "Alex has been different lately. He's so focused on making my parents happy, on fitting into their world, that sometimes I feel like I don't even know who he is anymore. He's not the guy I fell in love with." It hurt to hear that, but at the same time, I understood. Alex had been changing, slipping further into Lily's world and away from the person he used to be. "Do you still love him?" I asked carefully. "I do," she said quickly. "But love isn't enough if we're not honest with each other. And right now, I feel like we're both pretending to be something we're not." The conversation ended with a promise. Lily would confront Alex and figure out where they stood. I told her I hoped they could work things out, but also that she deserved to be with someone who truly made her happy. She thanked me, gave me a small, hesitant smile, and left. I drove home feeling a strange mix of emotions and a tiny spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could still be set right. The next day, Alex showed up at my door. He looked like he hadn't slept, his hair a mess and dark circles under his eyes. "We need to talk," he said. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He sat on the couch, his hands fidgeting nervously. "Lily talked to me," he started. "She told me everything." "And?" I prompted, crossing my arms. "And I messed up," he admitted. "I lied to you. I lied to her. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now that I wasn't. I just made everything worse." For a moment, I didn't say anything. I wanted to yell, to tell him how much he'd hurt me, but I also saw the regret in his eyes. "Why, Alex?" I finally asked. "Why did you feel like you had to lie?" He looked down at his hands. "Because I was scared. Scared that if I couldn't make everyone happy, I'd lose her. And scared that if I stood up to her parents, she'd see me as a failure. I didn't want to lose either of you." For all his mistakes, Alex was still that little boy I'd raised, desperate for approval, terrified of letting people down. But that didn't excuse what he'd done. "I don't know what to say, Alex," I told him honestly. "You hurt me. You lied to me, and you treated me like I didn't matter. I've always tried to be there for you, but right now, I don't know how to move past this." He nodded. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want to make it right. I just don't know how." We sat in silence for a long time after that. Finally, I said, "The first step is being honest. With me, with Lily, and with yourself. If you want to fix this, you have to stop trying to please everyone and figure out what you really want." Alex left that day with a lot to think about, and so did I. In the weeks that followed, life felt strangely quiet. I hadn't heard from Alex since our conversation. Then, one morning, the phone rang. It was Lily. "Hi, my name," she said hesitantly. "I wanted to let you know." I called off the wedding. The words hung in the air for a moment before I could respond. "Oh, Lily," I said softly. "I'm so sorry." She sighed, and I could hear the weight of her decision in her voice. It wasn't an easy choice, but I couldn't go through with it. Alex and I had a long talk, and I realized we were both trying so hard to fit into roles that didn't feel right. I love him, but I don't think we're ready for marriage. Not like this. I didn't know what to say. Part of me was relieved that she had the courage to recognize the problems before they became permanent, but I also felt sad for both of them. "Are you okay?" I asked. "I think so," she said. "It hurts, but it feels like the right thing to do. I just wanted you to know because, well, I know how much this has all affected you too." After the call, I sat in my kitchen thinking about all the moments that had led to this. The engagement party, the lies, the confrontation. It was like watching a house slowly crumble until there was nothing left to hold it up. I don't think the wedding would ever happen. And honestly, I don't think it was my fault. For now, I'm focusing on my own life, and my relationship with Alex would never be the same anymore. That's it, guys. This is my story. Tell me what you think.